became so powerful in the 1920s that it seized political control in 7 states. And in 1927, Klansmen marched, 50,000 strong, down the streets of the nation's capital. Clearly, the forces of 20s modernity had stirred a bitter resistance.
Then the Manasseh Mauler lashed out in his old ferocious style. Several fast, deadly punches.
In a decade fraught with so many changes, people in the 1920s seemed hungry for old-fashioned heroes, and an explosion in spectator sports provided them. Sports giants became household names, their every move followed by radio and an eager tabloid press. One name was known in more households than any other.
In our family, we were never baseball-oriented, but I would have had to be deaf not to have heard about Babe Ruth.
George Herman Ruth, the Babe, reshaped America's pastime. In an era of big events, he excelled at the game's biggest excitement, the home run. He hit 60 of them in a single season in 1927, a record that would stand for 4 decades. Fans drove from miles around to see him.
We used to get in a truck, 7 of us, put hay in the truck and just sit on it. And in 3.5 hours, we were from Scranton to the Yankee Stadium. It was 35 cents to see the Babe, Lou Gehrig, all the Yankee players.
Babe Ruth was a hero. Lou Gehrig was always my hero. Seems like everybody back then was a hero. We'd ride and get autographs. They graciously sent us pictures. 3 cent postage stamp, you got your picture back. Very, very nice time to live. Felt good to be an American.
The public's fascination with flying in the 1920s seemed fitting for a time when even gravity couldn't hold down progress, and when every boundary seemed just waiting to be broken.
Once I got up about 1,000 feet, it was like I was home. And that's the only way I can describe it to you. I was home. I never wanted to be anyplace else.
In 1927, one pilot would put aviation and himself on every front page in the world. On a misty May morning outside New York City, a plane called the Spirit of St. Louis was ready to take off for Paris. No one had ever flown solo across the Atlantic before. 6 others had tried, failed, and died. Ready to take the chance this time was Charles Lindbergh, the 6'2" son of a former congressman from Minnesota. Thousands of people came to watch him take off. Once he was out of sight, it seemed as if all America held its breath.
In Yankee Stadium, they had 3 minutes of silence, praying for him. Everybody in the country was praying for him.
Flying the fuel-heavy single-engine plane was a battle against weather, hunger, and fatigue. For the entire 33.5-hour flight, the Western world wondered about the fate of that tiny plane somewhere over the vast Atlantic.
It was a Saturday night. They hadn't heard from him for a long time. And I was walking up 125th Street and someone shouted, "They found him." He was flying over Ireland, and within an hour or so, he landed in Paris.
100,000 Parisians were there to welcome the shy young pilot. Lucky Lindy emerged from his plane carrying only a razor and a passport. His flight had represented the best of an era, a mastery of modern technology joined with old-fashioned values of courage, individualism, and hard-won achievement.
When Lindbergh came back, it was as though he walked on the water. The public couldn't get enough of him. He was the star. There wasn't a woman in America that wasn't crazy about him.
He was a hero. He was a nice guy. He was new. He was young. He was, he was kind of gawky, but that was what they wanted.
The parade for Lindbergh down Broadway was the biggest national celebration since the end of World War I.
Everybody became Lindbergh. They became the person that he was and represented. It was great. It made a big impression on me.
It was very exciting for all of us because we realized that a young man could do great things.
After Lindbergh's triumph, there remained only one continent for the airplane to conquer: Antarctica. The frozen and forbidding landscape at the bottom of the world was the boundary one of the century's great explorers, Admiral Richard Byrd, set out to break. His goal was to fly over the South Pole. His expedition was flooded with young and eager volunteers, all of them wanting to be heroes.
Admiral Byrd was going to select, I forget how many Boy Scouts to go to the pole. Now, I was about 12 at the time, and I was nominated as one of the guys to go. Now, this was a big thing. It was in all the papers. I came home and said, "Ma, what do you think? I'm going to go to the North Pole with Admiral Byrd." She says, "You can't go." I says, "Why?" She says, "You'll catch your death of cold." I never went. My cousin went instead. Amazing, isn't it?
There were 120 men connected with the Byrd expedition.
20-year-old Harvard student Norman Vaughn dropped out of school, trained for a year, and was finally selected to go on the adventure of a lifetime.
We stepped on land that had never been seen or touched before, and that just excited me beyond words. Absolutely a new frontier.
The expedition's home base was called Little America. Its 2-year mission was to conduct geological research and prepare for Byrd's record-breaking attempt.
We were responsible for getting out onto the interior of Antarctica as far as we could to be there for Admiral Byrd's rescue expedition should he have had a forced landing.
Just after midnight on November the 29th, 1929, Admiral Byrd's aircraft flew 500 feet above the geographic South Pole. He dropped a stone wrapped in an American flag. Americans and their airplane had reached the ends of the earth. By the end of the 1920s, anything seemed possible.
The most extraordinary thing about the decade of the 20s was a pandemic air of optimism, a feeling that the future of the country was unlimited. One of the great jazz songs of the day was Blue Skies, only but blue skies do I see.
The president promised blue skies in the country's future, At his inauguration in 1929, Herbert Hoover repeated the common wisdom of the day that Americans were on their way to riches. If proof was needed, all one had to do was look at the bubbling pool of wealth, the stock market.
The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, everybody, oddly enough, was in the stock market. One of our chauffeurs was in the market. If he can be in the market, anybody can be in the market.
There were no regulations as we have now. People got away with murder all the time. The government didn't bother them. So they were all making money. They were doing very well.
A boom in buying had driven up stock prices. Suddenly, in October of 1929, investors started cashing in their overpriced stock. A panic of selling started.
On October 29, 1929, it was obvious from the opening bell that things were wildly amiss.
At 9:30, there was a rumble on the floor. One of the page boys said, "Hey, Mike, look at the sell orders coming out of those phones."
The wheels really started to come off. The stock market went into a free fall. Crowds gathered in the street outside of the exchange.
At 3 o'clock, the bell rang and that was it.
More than $30 billion in paper value simply vanished that day as the stock market crashed.
The famous word, the crash. Overnight, it was like bombs fell.
The 20s bubble had burst, and with it, the decade's optimism.
People lost every penny that they had. Nobody had any pensions. There was no Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. If people lost their money, that was it. They were down and out.
People jumped off the George Washington Bridge, which had only just then, not long ago, been built. People we knew. My father was wiped out. He never, psychologically, he never recovered.
In 29, I lost $1 million. What do you do? It's the same story. Wash your face and hands and comb your hair and start all over again.
But as people would find out in the decade to come, a decade is different from the 20s as night is from day. Starting over was not going to be so easy. America, along with much of the world, faced the Great Depression. That's on the next episode of The Century, America's Time. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us.